the latest weird Kirk Cousins rumors, value discussions, and of course, just how superhuman is Justin Jefferson. It is Twitter Tuesday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun, and let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is just a regular audio app or YouTube, even Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app, and now we're even on the Sirius XM app, which is pretty fun. Thanks so much to those of you who do listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers, sound off if you can. And today's episode is Twitter Tuesday. That means I am answering your questions. You can send me those questions whenever you want at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or put a comment in the YouTube comments or fill out the Google form in the show notes. FYI, I'm doing 2 of these in a row, recording them on the same day. So if you do have a question, maybe hold off for a little bit. I'm going to be out of town, so I'm kind of pre-recording here. And if I am behind the times on anything for all of next week's shows, I apologize in advance for that. So some of you asked questions I will answer next week. I think I'm going to do like a long form one where I save 6 questions. I'll actually be able to go in a little more depth on them because they're bigger, longer ones. So if you asked other questions, do stay tuned. I might get to them, but I'll get to as much as I can. The first one comes from Brian Peacock, who is the Locked On 49ers host and also does Peacock and Williamson, another Locked On show on the whole NFL. I'm actually going on that. We're recording on Wednesday, so probably Thursday's episode. He asks, what will Kirk Cousins bring to the 49ers offense next year? A whole bunch of you asked some version of this. I guess it's another Florio thing that basically said, don't rule out the odds of San Francisco, and that's the classic Florio, hey, don't rule it out. And then if it doesn't happen, you say, well, I didn't say it was going to happen. I just said don't rule it out. But of Kirk Cousins being the 49ers quarterback next year, and logically that lines up, right? He's slated to be a free agent. 49ers quarterback situation is bizarre. Kyle Shanahan likes him. We know that. He's a scheme fit and all that. And also said maybe the Rams. So that all makes sense, logically. I'll tell you right now, I don't think that NFL teams, I don't think Kyle Shanahan is thinking about this very much. That is very much a 2024 question. If it happens, we'll deal with that when we come to it. We got a lot of time to think about that. And right now, Kyle Shanahan is just trying to figure out how to win games with Trey Lance or Sam Darnold. That is the operative problem in San Francisco right now. But what I'll say about Kirk Cousins, all the improv stuff that Brock Purdy gives you, 49ers fans, say kiss that goodbye. This is Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's not afraid to throw to the outside. I think that is probably the best way to put it. There's you can run around a little, you can make a play a little bit, but it's never going to be his strength. He has gotten better at that as time has gone on, but still very much not a strength that I would give to him. But he'll be able to make throws that right now nobody on your roster can make, and that's what you really should be excited about if you get Kirk Cousins, of course, assuming that the price is right, as always is the consideration. Brent G asks, the offense seemed to lack drive-to-drive consistency last year. What do you think KOC is looking to do to help avoid 3-and-outs back-to-back? Is that where the run game comes in? Yes, that is precisely where the run game comes in. So this is an interesting thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. We talk about the Vikings and their point differential and their overall stuff, but it was a lot of streaky, a lot of elite, bad. And it averages out to something average. But to call it average is kind of a misnomer because it was at no point could you say they are playing okay right now. They're either playing great or bad. And I think part of that is there's a philosophy, and this is sort of the cost of it. Because if you remember, O'Connell talked about constantly being on the attack. Attack. That was a big thing in training camp. We're always on the attack. It's never going to be let off the brakes or let off the gas. And everybody's really excited about that, right? This is what we want to do, run up the score and all that. And so when you get behind in a game, you start off playing poorly and you press and you press and you press and you press. That could lead to a comeback, right? That attacking mentality. Maybe you rip off 3 touchdowns and suddenly you go and it's just streaky. Kirk Cousins is a streaky quarterback. That's part of it too. But you can get on a good streak. You can make the comeback, right? Think about the Bills game. They were behind 2 scores in the Lions game, the first Lions game that they won, the Colts game, of course, the big one. Um, and you can kind of dig yourself out of a hole that other teams aren't really going to be able to dig themselves out of if they don't have that same mentality. The problem is, and this is why other teams don't have that mentality, you could dig the hole deeper. Think Cowboys game, Packers game, Eagles game. It can turn into a blowout. So there's no world in which you lose by just like a normal amount, right? You either make this crazy comeback or you make it way worse. You get beat by 40. And I think that lack of consistency too is a lack of a run game, because if you don't have a good ability to chew clock, get that run game going when you're in a lead, and sustain drives that are heavy run drives. The Vikings couldn't do that. Then you can get a 2-score lead and give it up all the time, and that's why they couldn't put anyone away either. They couldn't run up the score unless they wanted to hit like 4 touchdown drives in a row. After hitting 4 touchdown drives in a row, it's like nobody's that good. So yes, the answer to that is I think is the run game, is being able to sort of slow the pace down and say, here is where we're at. We're in a good advantageous position, up a score, or up, 10 points in the end of the third quarter. And we just kind of want to slow this game down and start removing chances for them to come back. Zimmer style, they didn't really have that muscle and they want to flex it a little bit more. And I think that's where the run game comes in. And it can be a little bit easier to be drive to drive consistent when everything is in a shot play. Shot plays are just going to be inconsistent. If you call 3 shot plays all the time, you're going to go 3 and out a bunch of the time. So I think that's part of it. And having a run game, a different pitch, a different speed to go to, can help keep things a little bit more consistent, fill things out a little bit, and have the offense be a more complete thought. Joshua Brook asks, Luke, what is sound off? This is what I always tell to my hashtag every day, it means chime in, tweet at me, leave a YouTube comment, send an email, whatever. If you're a hashtag everydayer, I want to hear from you. I appreciate you. That's all that means. Sports Guy 709 asks, what players not on people's radar do you think will shine in camp and earn an unexpected roster spot or starting job? The meme here from the Minnesota Football Party is Najee Thompson. We actually talked to Najee Thompson on this show. Go listen to that. It's a great interview. But as like a special teamer, he was not a good enough corner. And he was not even a corner until his last 2 years in college. He was a wide receiver convert that's not particularly athletic, at least not in his testing. So bringing him into play from scrimmage wouldn't really make sense, even as a camp body. Like there's better options for that, but really, really good special teamer. Lots of blocked kicks, lots of plays on all the units, excels on all the units, and was very much a Matt Daniels guy. Has a relationship with Matt Daniels, so that's your guy who sneaks onto a roster. If you're looking for someone that might have a bigger role than we think, I think Troy Reader's a good example. Again, that was another Minnesota Football Party thing we did. On today's Minnesota Football Party, actually on Mondays, where we kind of talked about weak links on the deep part of the roster. And I think we all kind of agreed that like Troy Reader could get a bigger role than we think, for however good or bad you think that is. So that's somebody. In terms of who could surprise and steal a starting role, I think on the offensive line a lot, like Chris Reed would be one that like knocks somebody off that we're totally not expecting. That O-line is pretty much solidified. So if you want a surprising outcome, Chris Reed maybe taking the center job or taking that guard job from Ed Ingram. Get Quackin says, when can I start dooming about Hunter? You can doom however you want, but I don't want to hear about it, man. I think if you really want, like right now, the Danielle Hunter thing is very nebulous and not really worth sweating until we get more information. I think what that information would be if we get the report that the Vikings are no longer negotiating with Hunter, that negotiations have broken off, then we can doom, right? Or if you hear like the Vikings are actively seeking to trade Hunter, where right now teams are calling them, but they're kind of, I don't know, they're not really taking anything that's not a crazy serious Godfather can't turn it down offer. If that dynamic changes, then you can start dooming on Hunter. Everything else you can sort of write off as posturing, negotiating through the media. That is how these negotiations tend to go down. And we'll see what ends up happening. But honestly, man, it's a free country. Doom however much you want. I've got a lot more questions that I want to make sure that I have the time to get to. But before I do so, let me talk to you about The sponsor of today's episode, FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and it's America's #1 sportsbook for a number of reasons. It's safe, secure, very easy to use. They pay you out instantly. They've got all kinds of great promotions going on at the website all the time. So go to FanDuel.com, and if you're new, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you whiff on your first bet. So if you maybe said that the Colorado Rockies, maybe you bet them plus 20 against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And you would have been wrong on that. Of course, that spread ended up being bigger. Fair enough. Happens to all of us. You can go to FanDuel.com, and if you whiff on that, you might get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get signed up at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Thanks so much for those of you who do listen to this show every single day. And hey, why don't you go check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. Eventually, some point this week, I do want to get the Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans piece out. It's very close to being done, so hopefully I can get it out as soon as things slow down a little bit before I go on this trip. Check that out. But you can check out all kinds of stuff. And Ed Ingram one if you're interested. A couple on Jordan Addison. I think one on every single rookie we drafted, except I haven't done Jaquelin Roy yet, but I do kind of eventually want to get to him, as well as some other longer form projects that I'm working on sort of in the background on a more long-term basis. Next question on this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast comes from Shadow Flame, who asks, TJ Hawkinson seems to be going under the radar regarding the passing game. How big of a role do you expect him to have? I think he's going under the radar because there's not much to discuss. It's like we kind of know what his role was last year, and we all just kind of expect it to be the same thing, which was as well as the second passing option. And hopefully, one of Osborne or Addison can sort of take over that mantle like a wide receiver should. But I don't know if he's that under the radar. Like the fantasy community is arguing right now over whether or not he's a top 5 fantasy tight end. That's pretty good, and what kind of volume to expect from him is sort of at the crux of that argument. And because it's very unknown, you can kind of see both sides of it. But I mean, he's, going to be your main why. He's going to do a lot of the things George Kittle does for the 49ers, those kinds of roles. And he's still going to serve as one of the primary foils to, if the team wants to sit in too high and bracket Justin Jefferson all day, TJ Hawkinson is kind of the guy that punishes that. And hopefully you have another guy that punishes that in Addison, and hopefully KJ Osborne can do his thing as well from time to time. That seems to be the thesis here. Jack asks, how many years until people can be justifiably concerned with Kwesi's drafts? I think this is a question everybody has on their mind because we had one draft and the two main guys got injured, right? And weren't good, right? They didn't start. And, Caleb Evans kind of did play, but he also got injured. And Brian Asamoah didn't play till the end, so we don't really know. And it all feels very bleak. Here's the deal. The second year, it always feels a little bleak because guys that maybe needed a year didn't play. And we're sort of under it, like it's easy to assume, well, they're never going to play, but that's not true, right? I think you need 3 years. By 3 years, with Lewis Cine, we still have some question marks, right? Think about like after year 1 of Darisaw, we didn't know what Darisaw was yet. We had reason to be optimistic, but we also had reasons to hedge that until he really came out in 2022 and he did more. Now we know that's only 2 years, but if you like Justin Jefferson, unequivocally, we know, right? There's no unknowns there anymore. There's no unknowns with Ezra Cleveland, no unknowns with Cameron Dantzler on the flip side of things. No unknowns with somebody like we know what DJ Wanham is, right? Going into year 4 of these guys. So after 3 years, I would say that's when you can really look at a draft and say, okay, this is what that was. Did we get what we expect to get out of that draft value? So if you can't really judge a draft, like 3 years, I think is when you can easily judge a draft. You can go ahead and try to judge a draft after 1 year, 2 year, all you want. That can be a fun exercise, but understand that there's probably a little bit of guesswork in it. So I would say if you're trying to evaluate a GM, you probably don't want the guesswork. So wait those 3 years. And then I say you don't want to do this off of 1 draft, maybe 2, but probably 3. So like 6 years in, I mean, look, Jack, the draft is a long-term thing. This is not the thing where you get to know immediately. I know we all love our draft grades and see that CBS posts after the, one day after the thing, but those are damn useless. They'd be more useful if I printed them out and wiped my ass with them. Ultimately, if you want to judge a GM, you probably need to wait 5 or 6 years to see how that turned out. And a lot of these GMs don't even last that long, which I think is insane. It's a long-term proposition. You have to sort of do the longitudinal study to understand it. Anything else, you're just going to add a lot of guesswork, and hey, maybe you end up being right, maybe you don't. But I think if you really wanted to push it, maybe you could argue 2 years. Like, I'd be willing to listen to that, but it's a long-term game. 5 or 6 is my answer. Forrester asks, how many Super Bowls would the Vikings have won if we held them #accountable for their mediocrity? And is it fewer than 7? So this is, I think, looking at a Judd Zulgad take that was basically that, like, Minnesota sports fans are, it was a Score North like debate that, like, are Minnesota sports fans too nice, making the franchises complacent? That's not fans' job. We don't have to do anything for the team. We don't owe the team anything, and the team doesn't owe us anything. They're putting on an entertainment product that we buy tickets to. Whether or not we, like, booed enough is not going to make them change, like, the overall entire direction of the franchise. I think that's just kind of bored summer whinging. Is it fewer than 7? No, but of course it's not. No, they would have won 8 Super Bowls in a row is the answer to that question. Herb P20 asks, what would that mean? What would an extension of Hunter mean for a possible extension of Cousins next year? Means even less money for JJ, Hawk, and Kirk, but I assume also a later draft position. How would it change the likeliness percentage? So a Danielle Hunter extension, the JJ and Hawk extensions are also, like, going to be resolved one way or another before that. So we're kind of asking, basically what you're asking is, do they still do Kirk if they don't have the cap space to do it? And the answer is, if they're really motivated to do it, they'll find a way. There's a bunch of void years on Kirk's contract. They can find a way to spread that money out. They absolutely can do it if they are so motivated to do it. And I think because it's quarterback and quarterback is so important, nickel and diming becomes a lot less attractive there. Just get the dang thing done if you want. So I don't think it changes things a whole lot. What changes it, and this is what I talked about when Kirk Cousins basically said we're not talking about the contract anymore. What changes it is 2023. How Kirk Cousins plays in that season, how that season ends, even if it's not Kirk Cousins' fault. Like, if it ends the same way the Giants game ended, where Kirk had a great game, but it ended on a bad Kirk play, and, like, that's the taste in your mouth, like, that is going to be what has an effect on things. You have to answer the question first, do we want to do this? Before you answer the question, okay, can we do this? How do we do this? But first you got to ask, do we want to do this? And with quarterback, if you want to do it, you'll figure out a way. Rock NHL asks, what's your confidence level in the returning O-line? Obviously the tackles are set, but still feels like there's a lot of questions on the interior. Yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised that they brought back basically the same unit and didn't bring in any new serious competition. You can, I guess, talk yourself into Chris Reed competing with Ed Ingram, but they're not switching reps or anything like that. They're not rotating. There's not an actual, nobody's getting, the only players rotating in and getting first team reps are Oli Udo and Vidarian Lowe, as Blake Brandel, I believe, is still, or no, he's not hurt. He's just not starting with the ones. It's really interesting. That's the only, like, first team rotation going on. Everybody else is chalk. So interesting stuff. We hope we see a step forward from Ingram. We've seen steps forward from Ezra Cleveland every year, so we have good reason to expect another one, but not necessarily take it to the bank. And I think Garrett Bradbury is who he is. We kind of know who he is. I think if you think that Garrett Bradbury suddenly got a lot better last year, you're mistaking scheme stuff for actual genuine improvement. They just used him smarter. And hopefully they learned that lesson. They can continue to use him smarter. That's the optimistic take on the O-line. But yeah, I think all three of those guys are question marks. And then, of course, the big one is Brian O'Neill going to be ready for the season? Partially torn Achilles in January. That's rough. So we'll see. But you're right, Rock NHL. There's definitely a lot of questions on the interior. I want to make sure that I get to all of these questions, so let's keep it rolling. Maybe go a little bit of rapid fire coming up on this Twitter Tuesday episode of Locked On Vikings podcast. Thanks again to everybody who is hanging out for this June episode, deep June episode of Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Skull Bunch of Numbers, who says, let's say Donatel wasn't nearly as bad last year and ran the Fangio scheme to perfection. Which scheme do you think fits our offense better from a complementary football perspective, Fangio or Flores? I don't know what you mean by complementary football, but I'm guessing you're just asking, like, who fits this roster better? And what's weird is this roster has now been built kind of halfway. There's, like, still a couple Zimmer guys. There's a couple of Fangio scheme Ed Donatel guys. And now there's a couple of Flores guys. Like, it's a weird hodgepodge, which is kind of the downside of turning through defensive coordinators and being really reactive about it. Not that that's necessarily the wrong thing, but it comes with a cost, right? If you're going to not stick by that scheme, you're going to move off of it. Maybe that's the right choice, but it is not a costless one. Now you've got a weird hodgepodge of guys. The Lewis Scenes, the Andrew Booths, the Brian Asamoahs, they were drafted to do a different thing, and now Flores has to figure out that thing. The nice thing is both of these have a sense of aligning far away and coming downhill. Keep things in front of you, then come downhill. There's that philosophy. So the difference is going to be mitigated a lot because they both have that same kind of architecture. But really, I think the biggest thing is, would you rather have these guys in zone match or in man? That's the biggest consideration here. Zone match takes a lot of reading, but maybe is a little bit less demanding. Man is man, right? Very easy. I have number 13, but I got to cover number 13. And if I'm not capable of doing that, then I lose and we suck. So that's the key difference. And I think for that, a well-run version of the Fangio scheme is probably better, but that kind of takes away, a well-version thing takes away, or a well-run version takes away all the problems that happened on that defense last year. That means blitzing more, which you're getting with Flores and you didn't get with Donatel. That means calling more diverse coverages, which you wouldn't get with Flores. Flores, I mean, it's not horribly undiverse, but it's a lot of just kind of straight up man-to-man, the beauties and its simplicity kind of thing. And with the correctly called Fangio thing, correctly installed and taught Fangio thing, you can call cover 3, you can call 6, you can call quarters, you can call 2, you can call 1, you can call a big blitz, you can call 0, you can call everything. Ideally, you have all that stuff. But I think what I wanted out of the Fangio thing, and why the excitement that I had about it was about its versatility, how difficult it was to read, and how aggressive it was. And then it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't versatile, and it wasn't difficult to read. They just lined up and played kind of soft zone all day and didn't disguise it. So yeah, a totally different version of the Vikings defense. There could have been one there. That would have been what we were talking about if the Vikings, say, hired Sean Desai or Ezra Evero. But alas, here we are going back to the man coverage thing and sort of back into the world that we were in with Zimmer, at least architecturally. Ingram's left foot said, if you could transport a historical Viking camp former long shot to fill a need on the current team, who would you pick? It's very interesting. So if I could transport, I'm guessing I'm getting like the prime version of that. Adam Thielen is very much, give me 2018 Adam Thielen, right? His pick was John Randall. Great pick. John Randall probably is the pick. I'm going to throw in a wild card, which is Mick Tingelhoff. Mick Tingelhoff, believe it or not, was an absolute roster long shot. When he first came in, he was just this like undersized kid from a farm in, Nebraska. And we didn't really expect to get what we got out of him. One of the greatest centers of all time. That's a possible thing if you're worried about Bradbury, although he's another undersized kind of like faster center. But he was a mean dude. Like he'd beat you up. Skull Squatch asks, what are your thoughts on only starting QBs on rookie contracts? Find a decent one, build an elite team around him, and then when his contract is up, move on to the next one. It's really tough to build a team around a quarterback and then put a new quarterback into that team, then build a team around that quarterback. That sounds like a really good way to be bad 3 years out of 4 in perpetuity, and also expose yourself to what if the quarterback sucks. It's really easy to imagine getting, the best quarterback every single year, but even if you are in draft position to take the guy, who's to say you're not getting that year's Deshaun Kaiser, and now that's 4 years down the drain, right? Or maybe, you've got to move on from that guy then. Well, we'll get rid of him after 1 year. We'll draft a new guy the next year. But how do you know that guy's not just having his Josh Allen year? And you just needed to be a little more patient, right? You're probably going to wait 3 or 4 years with a first-round quarterback, and you're going to piss away 3 or 4 years and build a whole new team around the new guy if he's not in the same style. It sounds like a very good way to grind your franchise into dust, like the New York Jets. If you liked the New York Jets of like the mid 2010s, where the best year they had was when Ryan Fitzpatrick like managed to string together a few games without falling apart before falling apart, then congratulations. If you enjoy playoff droughts and teams that are so bad you can't even really bring yourself to watch them on Sundays, this sounds like a great way to speed run your way into that purgatory hell. Steezo asks, what are your thoughts on getting 4 all-22 angles? Yeah, this is some cool news. The NFL is going to release an extra all-22 angle. So one of the 4 is the scoreboard. So they released technically 3. So they're only giving you 1 extra, but it's cool. You get the sideline view as always, which is literally the all 22 view. You get to see all the players, no cutoff. There's the end zone view, and then there is a wide end zone view. So it's the end zone angle, but you get to see the receivers and the cornerbacks on the outside. It's pretty cool. You get to see stuff about alignments. You can see the releases a little bit better. You can see I think it's going to make it a lot easier to look at things like what we were talking about yesterday with Andrew Booth. If you're in an outside responsibility, like the outside corner in cover 3, or an outside corner in cover 4, and you're aligning inside and you're playing inside, that's a mistake that will be easier to point out. And NFL teams have access to that information already. They just don't release it to the public. But I think a more informed public is always a cool thing. I'm pretty stoked on it. Brian Sandista asks, have you ever come home to find your bunnies have chewed your electrical cords? Asking for a friend. Let's see if they'll let me. Hang on. For those who are not watching on YouTube, I just grabbed one of the rabbits. Do you like electrical cords? Answer for the audience. I hope that made a mic sound. The answer is, so we keep it all sectioned off well enough where that's not an option. But yes, rabbits are known to go after the spicy hay, as it were. And you should keep that. There's stuff you can get. I think you can get it at like Home Depot or something that will cover up those that are like cord covers that make it so that they can't chew on the spicy hay. Next one comes from Red and Purple, who says, if you could change one rule in the NFL, what would it be? The worst rule in the NFL is the fumble through the end zone touchback rule. It's the dumbest rule in history. If the ball bobbles a little bit as you reach out for the pylon, the other team can get the ball in a touchback, even if they don't recover it. Here is my logic to this. I've never gotten a good answer to this. If you fumble, the defense has to recover it to get it, right? Goes out of bounds, it stays with the offense's team. If it goes out of bounds in the end zone, which is an arbitrary distinction, there is no difference there. It's just a different part of the field that's painted different. It becomes the defense's ball and they didn't have to recover it. In my opinion, if you want the ball, you should have to recover the fumble. And if nobody recovers the fumble, default it back to the offense. Keep it simple, stupid. I don't like the idea that, don't fumble. And you're basically legislating out the very cool things that they put on Madden covers where people like reach out for the end zone. You're legislating that out of the game and discouraging it. I think it's bad from a game design perspective. It's bad from a logic perspective, and it's bad from a simplicity perspective. I would change that rule. Spinner Jeremy asks, top 3 favorite current NFL uniforms. Current uniforms. The Chargers, just default powder blue, yellow pants, I think is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of, there are certain monochrome ones that I really, really like. I like the Lions all Honolulu blue is very good. I'm trying to think of like some of the best alts, and I'm forgetting some of the coolest alts in the NFL. So forgive me if I've forgotten your favorite. I'm thinking of this off the dome. Kind of like the Bengals color rush, to be honest, with the white helmet. I think the whiteout Cincinnati Bengals thing is very good, and it pairs really well with just about any opposing look. Like the Dolphins Bengals game, it kind of is remembered now for being the one where Tua got hurt really bad, like again. But it was a very, very cool looking game, uniform matchup wise. I hope that the Bengals and Dolphins do the exact same thing again. I love it. I like a lot of the things the Dolphins can do. So the Dolphins throwbacks are glorious. Another one from Spinner Jeremy is, would Justin Jefferson survive the Titan implosion because he's him and wouldn't let the pressure get to him? Absolutely, buddy. For those who are living under a rock, I guess, yeah, there was a submersible that went, an ill-fated submarine expedition to the Titanic. It was a tourist thing, privately funded by a person who made lots of mistakes. Very, very poorly designed thing that ended up imploding underwater. No survivors. Really sad thing. But yeah, Justin Jefferson's him, and he would definitely be able to. I mean, he can withstand any pressure, right? He's super cool under pressure. Or maybe he would be also turned into a golf ball, but like a cool golf ball, like a calm golf ball. CJ Hamsburner is the last one, which asks, do you think Fabiano Caruana will bounce back after a heart-crushing loss to Hikaru Nakamura in the final round of Norway chess? I'm going to mix it up. No, I don't think he will. Still don't know who that is. So tomorrow we're going to go back to the Everyman series. And then, of course, remember, next week I'll be out, but we'll still have shows every single day, Monday through Friday, baby. I'm going to keep them pre-recorded, and maybe I'll work a little bit from on the road, but I'm trying not to so I can enjoy my trip. But I will, regardless, I'll see you tomorrow. And as always, Skull.